The air backstage was thick with the smell of old dust, stale coffee, and the electric hum of anticipation. It was a scent I knew better than my own perfume, the scent of controlled chaos just moments before the curtain rises. From the monitor in front of me, I could see them. 1,000 faces, maybe more, all looking at the empty stage. Their expressions a mix of reverence and excitement. They were here for him, for Leo, my Leo, the man who had built an empire on one single powerful word, truth. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the cavern of my chest. It wasn't stage fright. I was used to this. For 5 years, I had been the architect behind the curtain, the one who made sure the lights hit just right, the sound was flawless, and that his custom blend of ginseng and green tea in that sleek silver thermos was at the perfect temperature, 92 degrees. Not 91, not 93. Leo was a man of precision in all things, or so I thought. In my trembling hand, I held another thermos, identical to his in every way. Same brand, same stupid motivational quote etched on the side. The truth will not just set you free, it will make you. I'd spent a week tracking down an exact duplicate online. But what was inside this one? It wasn't ginseng and green tea. It was a promise of a different kind of truth. A much, much uglier one. His real thermos was on the small prep table next to his notes. The steam rising from the spout was a gentle, innocent cloud. In 30 seconds, his assistant, Mark, would come in, grab it, and hand it to him for his final pre-show ritual. 30 seconds to decide if I was a woman scorned or a complete and utter monster. 30 seconds to swap 5 years of love and devotion for a single moment of devastating, world-shattering revenge. My fingers tightened around the cold metal. The choice had already been made, weeks ago, in the sterile silence of a hotel room that wasn't mine. What was about to happen on that stage wasn't just a confession, it was an exorcism. And I was so glad you're here to see it. If you're watching this, and you feel that cold knot of betrayal twisting in your stomach, please, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments where you're listening to my story from, because I need to know how far a broken heart can echo. I want to know I'm not alone. Our story, Leo's and mine, didn't start in the shadows of a theater. It started in the bright, hopeful light of a university library. I was a PR and communications major, buried in textbooks about brand management and crisis control. He was a charismatic psychology grad student with eyes that could convince a stone to weep and a voice that made you believe every word he said was gospel. He wasn't the Leo you see today, the polished motivational guru with a 7-figure book deal and a legion of followers who called themselves truth seekers. Back then, he was just Leo, a guy with a brilliant mind and a slightly worn-out sweater who would share his fries with me and talk for hours about changing the world. I fell for the dream before I fell for the man. I saw his potential. I saw the way people leaned in when he spoke, the way his ideas about radical honesty and self-actualization resonated with our generation, a generation starved for authenticity. I was the one who encouraged him to start a blog. I designed his first website, edited his first rambling posts into sharp, shareable articles. I was the one who told him, "Leo, your voice is a brand. Let's build it." And we did. We built it from the ground up. My degree in PR wasn't just a piece of paper, it was the blueprint for his entire career. I was his manager, his publicist, his strategist, his editor, and his girlfriend. We were a team. An unstoppable force. His charisma, my strategy. His words, my marketing plans. We moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn, fueled by cheap coffee and overwhelming ambition. Those early years were a blur of all-nighters, brainstorming sessions on our living room floor, and the exhilarating thrill of watching his follower count tick upwards, first by the hundreds, then by the thousands. I never wanted the spotlight. I loved the work. The challenge of shaping a narrative, of taking this brilliant, beautiful man and presenting him to the world. I managed his schedule, negotiated his contracts, and stood in the wings watching with a heart full of pride as he captivated audiences. I was his rock, his foundation. He told me that every night. "Clara," he'd say, pulling me close, his voice thick with emotion after a successful talk. "None of this exists without you. You are the truth behind my truth." I believed him. I clung to those words like a prayer. They were the foundation of our life, the bedrock of my trust. A bedrock that, I would soon discover, was nothing but sand, ready to be washed away by the slightest tide of deceit. The first crack in that foundation wasn't a seismic event. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor. It happened on a Tuesday, about 6 months before the night of the show. He had just returned from a 3-day conference in Chicago, a big one, a keynote speech that had gone viral on social media. I expected him to come home exhausted but buzzing, ready to dissect every moment with me as we always did. Instead, he was quiet, distant. When I hugged him at the door, he felt stiff, his arms barely wrapping around me. I chalked it up to exhaustion. "Tough trip?" I asked, taking his bag. He nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Just draining. You know how at Island." But I didn't. Not really. He was always drained after a tour, but it was a happy, fulfilled kind of drained. This was different. This was a heavy, hollow exhaustion. Later that night, as he was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text. I never, ever looked at his phone. We had built our life on trust, on radical honesty, as he preached. But my intuition, that primal, nagging voice that every woman knows, screamed at me. I glanced over. It was from a name I didn't recognize. Serafina. The message was simple, almost innocent. "Last night was magical. You truly are an inspiration. Can't wait for the next chapter." My breath hitched. Serafina? I scrolled through his contacts. No, Serafina. I checked his social media followers, his professional contacts. Nothing. An inspiration. The words were vague enough, professional enough. She could have been an attendee, a fan who got his number. I told myself to stop. I was being crazy, insecure. Leo had millions of followers who adored him. But that word, magical. It didn't feel professional, it felt personal, it felt intimate. I put the phone down, my hands shaking. When he came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, I tried to sound casual. "Get any interesting feedback from the conference?" He looked at me, a flicker of something panic in his eyes before it was replaced by his usual warm smile. "The usual stuff," he said, toweling his hair. "People feeling inspired, ready to change their lives. You know." He didn't mention anyone named Serafina. And in that moment, for the first time in 5 years, I heard the lie. It wasn't in his words. It was in the space between them. It was the first crack, and I had this sickening feeling that if I pressed on it, my entire world would shatter into a million pieces. That single text message from Serafina became a splinter in my mind. It was a tiny, insignificant thing, yet I couldn't get it out. For days I tried to rationalize it, to bury it under the weight of our shared history and my unwavering belief in him. He's a public figure, I told myself. Women throw themselves at him constantly. It was probably just an overzealous fan. I replayed his reaction in my head 1,000 times, that fleeting moment of panic in his eyes. Was it real, or had I imagined it? Had my own insecurities painted a ghost on a perfectly blank canvas? I felt like I was going insane, questioning my own judgment. This was Leo, the man whose entire philosophy was built on transparency. The irony was so thick I could taste it, metallic and bitter like blood. I decided to do something I was ashamed of. I started watching, not in an obvious way, but with the subtle, trained eye of a public relations professional who knows how to read the subtext of every interaction. I watched the way his thumbs would hover over his phone screen before he quickly locked it when I walked into the room. I noticed he started taking calls in his office with the door closed, something he never used to do. When I'd ask who it was, he'd give me a vague, dismissive answer. Just a publisher. Or logistics for the Denver event. His answers were plausible, but they lacked detail. They lacked the enthusiastic, oversharing that was so fundamentally Leo. The man who once told me every thought in his head was now editing his life for me, and I could feel the omissions like missing pages in our story. The real turning point came about 2 weeks later. We were having dinner at our favorite Italian place in the West Village, a cozy spot with checkered tablecloths and candlelight that had been the backdrop for so many of our milestones. He was in the middle of a story about a new book idea, his hands gesturing passionately, his eyes lit up in that familiar way. For a moment, everything felt normal again. The splinter in my mind felt distant, foolish. Then, as he reached for his wine, his sleeve pulled up, and I saw it. A faint, reddish mark on the inside of his wrist. It wasn't a scratch. It was shaped almost perfectly, like a brand or a bite mark, small and circular, already starting to heal. My fork clattered onto my plate. The sound was deafening in the sudden silence. "What's that on your wrist?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He glanced down, and for the second time, I saw that flash of pure, unadulterated panic. He pulled his sleeve down instantly, his movements jerky and unnatural. "Oh, that? Nothing. Burned myself on the coffee pot this morning. Clumsy me," he said with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. But I had made the coffee that morning. I had handed him his mug. The coffee pot was an old drip machine with a plastic handle. It was impossible to burn yourself on it like that. The lie was so blatant, so lazy. It was an insult to my intelligence. I felt a cold dread wash over me, so intense it made me nauseous. The candlelight flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on his face, and for the first time, I felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing the face of the man I loved. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, the same sound that had soothed me for years, but now it sounded like a ticking clock, counting down the seconds until my world exploded. The need to know became a physical ache, a gnawing hunger that overshadowed everything else. When I was sure he was sound asleep, I slipped out of bed. My hands were shaking so violently I had to steady them on his desk. His laptop was there, sleeping, just like him. It felt like the ultimate violation, a betrayal of the very principles our relationship was supposedly built on. My mind screamed at me to stop, to go back to bed and believe the clumsy lie about the coffee pot. But my heart, my gut, knew better. I typed in the password. Our password. Clara and Leo Truth 2019. The hypocrisy of it made me want to scream. I didn't know what I was looking for. Emails? Chat logs? I started with his browser history. It was mostly what I expected, research articles, news sites, links to his own social media. But then I saw a string of searches from the week he was in Chicago. Best speakeasy bars near Magnificent Mile. Couples massage Chicago downtown. And one that made my blood run cold. Serafina's Sanctuary, exclusive Chicago spa. I clicked the link. The website was discreet, luxurious. It offered holistic treatments, aromatherapy, and, under a private, members-only section, intimate wellness therapies and tandem energy sessions. The language was vague, ethereal, but the implication was crystal clear. And there, on their practitioner's page, was a photo. A stunning woman with long, dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through the screen. Her name was Serafina. Underneath her photo was a small logo, a swirling, circular design. The exact same shape as the mark on Leo's wrist. I felt the air leave my lungs in a silent gasp. I slammed the laptop shut, the click echoing in the stillness of the apartment. I stumbled back to the bed, my body feeling heavy and disconnected. The truth wasn't a splinter anymore. It was a spear, driven straight through my chest. He hadn't just cheated. He had participated in some kind of weird, intimate ritual with another woman, and then branded himself with her mark. He had brought this violation into our home, into our bed. I curled up on my side of the bed, as far away from him as I could get, my body racked with silent sobs. The man sleeping peacefully beside me wasn't my Leo. He was a liar, a stranger. And I realized with sickening clarity that the brand on his wrist wasn't just a mark from another woman. It was a brand on my heart, a permanent sear of betrayal that would never, ever fade. I knew I couldn't confront him yet. I had no leverage, no undeniable proof beyond a spa website and a suspicious mark. He would just lie again, more convincingly this time. He would twist my suspicion into paranoia, my pain into insecurity. He was a master of words, a manipulator of narratives. If I was going to face him, I couldn't come with a half-told story. I needed the whole, ugly, unvarnished truth, and I was going to get it no matter what it cost me. The strategist in me, the PR professional I had been for him for so long, was starting to wake up. But this time, I wouldn't be managing his crisis. I would be creating it. The discovery of Serafina's sanctuary changed the very air I breathed. Our apartment, once my sanctuary and our shared workspace, now felt like a cage. Every object held a new, sinister meaning. The photos of us smiling on the mantelpiece seemed to mock me. The king-sized bed, our supposed haven, felt like a crime scene. I was living with an enemy who wore the face of my greatest love, and the cognitive dissonance was tearing me apart. I had to maintain a facade of normalcy, which was the most excruciating part of it all. I woke up next to him, made him coffee, and discussed his schedule for the day, all while my mind was a maelstrom of suspicion and grief. I was playing the biggest role of my life, and the performance was draining me to my very soul. My quest for undeniable proof became my singular focus. I started with the one thing I knew he couldn't easily manipulate: our finances. As his business manager, I had full access to our joint accounts and his business credit cards. I told him I was doing a deep dive audit to prepare for tax season, a plausible excuse that he accepted without a second thought. For 3 nights in a row, after he went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating my face, and I went through every single transaction for the past 6 months. It was a tedious, soul-crushing task. Line by line, I sifted through the digital breadcrumbs of his life. Flights, hotels, Ubers, restaurant charges for his business trips, they were all there, just as they should be. For a moment, a sliver of hope pierced through my despair. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the spa was just a bizarre, one-time mistake. But then I found it. It was a charge from 3 months prior, during a trip to San Francisco. A charge for $3,000 to a jewelry store called Elysian Gems. I had never heard of it. I certainly hadn't received a $3,000 piece of jewelry. My heart started to pound. I quickly searched the store online. It was a high-end boutique jeweler specializing in custom, spiritually significant pieces. Their gallery featured delicate necklaces, bracelets, and rings, many incorporating unique, swirling symbols. One of them, a pendant of eternal connection, featured the exact circular design from the spa's logo, the brand on his wrist. I felt like I was going to be sick. It wasn't just a one-time thing in Chicago. This had been going on for months. He had bought her a gift, an expensive, meaningful gift, using our money, the money I had helped him earn. The audacity of it, the sheer disrespect, was breathtaking. But it still wasn't the smoking gun. He could invent a story, claim it was a gift for his mother or a business associate. I needed something with his voice, his words, his unmistakable admission. I needed to catch the monster, not just its shadow. That's when I remembered the burner phone. About a year ago, during a security consultation for his growing brand, A consultant had recommended he keep a prepaid, untraceable phone for emergencies, in case his main phone was ever hacked. It was my idea. I had even picked it out for him. He was supposed to keep it in his go bag for travel. He had called it his spy phone and laughed it off, saying he'd probably never use it. I had a sudden, chilling certainty that he was using it now. The question was, where did he keep it? Not in his go bag. That was too obvious, and I often helped him pack it. It had to be somewhere I would never look. I waited until he left for a local podcast interview, a 2-hour window of opportunity. The moment the door clicked shut, my search began. I tore through his office, his closet, the pockets of his old coats. Nothing. I checked under the mattress, behind the books on his shelves, inside his shoeboxes. Still nothing. My panic began to rise. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe he was smart enough to keep it on him at all times. I was about to give up when my eyes landed on his collection of framed speaking awards on the wall. They were his prized possessions, symbols of the empire we had built. He dusted them himself every week. Tucked behind the largest one, the Visionary Voice of the Year award, was a small, black object held in place by a piece of tape. My spy phone. My hands were ice cold as I peeled it off the wall. It was a cheap, plasticky thing, a stark contrast to his sleek iPhone. I powered it on, my breath held tight in my chest. It wasn't password protected. He hadn't thought I would ever find it. The message log opened, and the world fell away. There were hundreds of texts, all to one contact, S. Serafina. I started scrolling from the bottom, going back months. The messages were a brutal, explicit chronicle of their affair. They talked about their meetings in different cities, referencing the spa in Chicago, the jeweler in San Francisco. They sent photos him shirtless in a hotel bed, her in a robe that was definitely not standard hotel issue. But the words were the worst part. The words were what broke me. They didn't just talk about their physical encounters. They talked about me. Leo. Clara is handling the logistics for the Unleash Your Truth tour. She's so good at the details. It frees me up to focus on the bigger picture with you. S. Poor little planner. Does she really believe all that stuff you say on stage? Leo. She has to. She built the stage. It's almost poetic. She thinks she's the architect of my success, but you're the architect of my soul. She's the foundation. You're the skyscraper. I had to put the phone down, my vision blurring with tears. Foundation. That's what I was to him. Something to be walked on, built upon, and ultimately left behind in the dirt while he and his skyscraper reached for the heavens. I picked the phone up again, forcing myself to read on. I needed to see it all. The final, fatal blow came from a message Leo had sent just a week ago. Leo. The tour is going to be massive. The book deal is closing. Once that money hits, things are going to change. I'm tired of living a double life. I need to figure out how to untangle from Clara without destroying the brand. She's so enmeshed in the business. A clean break would be a PR nightmare. S. You'll find a way. You're a master of narrative. Just create a new one. The guru who outgrew his partner. A sad but necessary evolution. Your followers will eat it up. They'll see it as another act of your radical honesty. That was it. That was their plan. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was using me to build his empire. And once it was secure, he was planning to discard me, packaging our breakup as another chapter in his brand's journey of truth. My pain, my heartbreak, my 5 years of devotion, all of it would be spun into content for his followers. I wasn't a person to him anymore. I was a potential PR crisis to be managed. I sat on the floor of his office, the burner phone clutched in my hand, and I shattered. It wasn't a loud, screaming breakdown. It was a silent, complete implosion. Everything I believed in our love, our partnership, his philosophy, my entire life's work, it all turned to ash in that moment. The grief was a physical force, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. I cried until my eyes were swollen shut and my throat was raw. I grieved for the man I thought I loved, and I grieved for the woman I had been, the trusting, naive woman who had poured every ounce of her being into a beautiful, meticulously crafted lie. When the tears finally stopped, something else had taken their place. The grief had burned away, leaving behind something cold, hard, and sharp. It was rage, a pure, crystalline rage, and with it, a terrifying clarity. They thought I was a PR problem? I would show them a PR crisis. They wanted to write a new narrative? I would give them a story they would never forget. My eyes drifted back to the award on the wall. Visionary Voice of the Year. He had a voice, all right, and I was going to make sure the whole world heard what he really had to say. The hours after finding the burner phone were a strange, surreal limbo. The rage was a constant, high-frequency hum beneath my skin, but on the surface, I was unnervingly calm. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind the kind of stillness you find at the eye of a hurricane. It was the calm of pure, unadulterated purpose. I meticulously placed the burner phone back behind the award, wiped my fingerprints from the frame, and went about cleaning the apartment, my movements robotic and precise. When Leo came home, I greeted him with a kiss, a gesture that felt as alien as kissing a marble statue. He was full of energy from his podcast, talking about the nuances of authenticity, and I just nodded and smiled. The ultimate PR professional, selling a product I knew was rotten to the core. Inside my head, a plan was beginning to form, nascent and chaotic, but fueled by the toxic messages I had burned into my memory. She's the foundation. You're the skyscraper. The image haunted me. A foundation's purpose isn't just to support, it's also to hold the potential for collapse. If the foundation cracks, the whole skyscraper comes crashing down. Before I could plan my demolition, I needed to confirm one final, sickening piece of the puzzle. The burner phone had texts from S, but I needed to know, with absolute certainty, who S was. The woman in the photo on the spa website was just a face. I needed a name. My mind raced through every person in our circle. Was it a publicist from another firm? A journalist who had interviewed him? Then a dark, insidious thought began to creep into my mind, a possibility so vile I had subconsciously pushed it away. It couldn't be. It was too cruel, too cinematic, too much of a cliché. It had to be a stranger. There was only one person I had confided in about my initial suspicions after finding the first text message. Only one person who had listened with a sympathetic ear, who had told me I was probably overthinking it, that Leo adored me. My best friend, my protégé, the junior publicist I had hired 2 years ago and mentored, the one I had championed and trusted implicitly. Her name was Savannah. I felt a fresh wave of nausea. No, it couldn't be her. Savannah was sweet, a little naive, and she worshipped both Leo and me. She saw us as the ultimate power couple. She was always the first to praise his speeches and the first to tell me what a genius I was for my PR strategies. She was like a little sister to me, but her name started with an S. And she had traveled with us to San Francisco for that conference 3 months ago. I had to know. I devised a little test, a small, carefully laid trap. The next day, I invited Savannah out for coffee, under the pretense of needing to vent. We sat at our usual corner table, the morning sun streaming through the window. She looked at me with those wide, innocent eyes, concern etched on her face. "Clara, you've seemed so stressed lately. Is everything okay with you and Leo?" she asked, her voice dripping with counterfeit sympathy. I took a deep breath. "It's just, I found something," I said, letting my voice tremble. "I found a receipt for a piece of jewelry. A really expensive necklace from a store in San Francisco. He never gave it to me." I watched her face like a hawk, searching for any flicker, any crack in her performance. She placed her hand over mine, her expression one of perfect, sisterly outrage. "Oh my God, Clara. Are you serious? Who would he be buying a necklace for?" Her acting was flawless. She was a better publicist than I had ever given her credit for. I don't know, I said, looking down at my coffee. But the store, it was called Elysian Gems. It had this strange, swirling logo. I let my voice trail off, and then I saw it. For less than a second, her eyes darted down to her own neck, where a delicate silver chain was tucked beneath the collar of her blouse. It was an involuntary, subconscious gesture, a reflex to protect or check on something precious. My gaze followed hers, and I saw the edge of a small silver pendant peeking out. A pendant with a swirling circular design. The pendant of eternal connection. The world seemed to slow down. The chatter of the coffee shop faded into a dull roar. In that moment, I saw everything. The late nights she'd supposedly stayed at the office to help me with tour logistics. The way she'd always find an excuse to talk to Leo alone, asking for his mentorship. The constant, effusive praise that I had mistaken for admiration, but was, in fact, the gloating of a rival. She wasn't my protégé. She was my replacement, waiting in the wings. And the worst part? I had invited her in. I had handed her the playbook to my life, and she had used it to tear everything down. I managed to hold myself together for the rest of our coffee, my heart a block of ice in my chest. I listened to her spin a web of lies, suggesting I hire a private investigator, offering to help me look through his things. She was trying to control the investigation, to lead me down dead ends while she continued her affair right under my nose. I walked home in a daze. The betrayal from Leo was a deep, gaping wound. But this betrayal from Savannah, this was a special kind of poison. He had broken my heart, but she had tried to break my spirit. She had preyed on my trust, my friendship, my mentorship. She had watched me suffer and pretended to be my confidant. Back in the apartment, the fog of shock finally lifted, and the calm, cold purpose returned, now 10 times stronger. My plan, which had been a vague sketch of revenge, began to sharpen into a high-definition blueprint. It wouldn't be enough to just expose Leo. I had to expose them both, and I had to do it in a way that would dismantle everything they had built on my back. My eyes fell on the massive promotional poster for Leo's upcoming seminar, the biggest event of his career, which I had spent the last 4 months planning. It was a sold-out, 2,000-seat theater in Manhattan. The event was called Unleash Your Truth. The irony was no longer just bitter. It was a weapon. His stage, the one I had built for him, would become his pillory. His philosophy of radical honesty would be the noose he'd hang himself with. And his adoring followers, his truth-seekers, would be the witnesses to his execution. I looked at the poster, at his smiling, confident face, and I felt a chill run down my spine. He was a master of narrative. Savannah had said it herself, but so was I. He had taught me everything I knew about captivating an audience, about the power of a perfectly timed revelation. I was about to give the performance of my life, and I wouldn't even have to be on stage. The foundation was about to crack, and I was going to make sure the entire world was watching when the skyscraper came tumbling down. The first step was research. I needed to find a truth serum, and I had a feeling it wouldn't be on Amazon Prime. The idea of a truth serum felt like something straight out of a spy movie, a fantastical notion that couldn't possibly exist in the real world. But my plan hinged on it. A simple accusation wouldn't be enough. Leo was too slick, too skilled at spinning narratives. He would deny everything, paint me as a hysterical, vengeful ex-girlfriend. The media would have a field day, but his core followers, the ones who had bought into his cult of personality, would likely stand by him. No, I needed the confession to come from his own mouth. I needed him to dismantle his own carefully constructed persona, piece by piece, in front of the very people who worshipped him. His downfall had to be an act of self-immolation. My quest began where all modern quests do, the internet. I spent hours, deep into the night, my face illuminated by the eerie blue glow of the laptop screen, diving into the murky depths of chemistry forums, biohacking subreddits, and ethnobotany websites. I quickly learned that the classic Hollywood truth serum, sodium pentothal, was a controlled barbiturate, impossible for a civilian to obtain and dangerous to administer without medical expertise. That was a dead end. But my research led me down a different path. I wasn't looking for a substance that forced the truth, but one that obliterated the filter between thought and speech. I needed a powerful disinhibitor, something that would dismantle the part of the brain responsible for social calculation, for lying, for maintaining a public facade. I found myself reading about nootropics, psychoactive substances, and obscure herbal remedies. The information was a confusing, often contradictory maze. But as a PR strategist, my greatest skill was research sifting through mountains of data to find a single, actionable insight. After 3 sleepless nights fueled by black coffee and a burning sense of purpose, I found a promising lead. It was a European research chemical, known in underground circles as Veritas 7. It wasn't technically illegal in the US, but it existed in a gray market, not approved for human consumption. According to user testimonials on a private forum, a small, carefully calibrated dose could induce a state of extreme suggestibility and emotional openness, effectively short-circuiting the brain's capacity for deception. Users described it as a liquid conscience. It was risky. The side effects were unpredictable, ranging from mild confusion to severe paranoia. But the potential reward was everything I had ever wanted. Getting my hands on it was the next hurdle. I couldn't just order it to our apartment. I created a fake email address and used a VPN to access a website on the dark web that sold research compounds. The site was rudimentary, the language cryptic. It felt like I was purchasing a state secret. I paid with cryptocurrency, a confusing process that took me an entire afternoon to figure out, and had the package sent to a private mail drop a dozen blocks away. The entire process felt clandestine and terrifying. I was breaking a dozen unwritten rules, stepping so far outside the carefully curated, respectable life I had built. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, and it was both horrifying and exhilarating. While I waited for the package to arrive, I focused on the delivery mechanism. The thermos. Leo's pre-show ritual was as predictable as the sunrise. 10 minutes before he was due on stage, he would meditate in his dressing room. 5 minutes before, his assistant, Mark, would bring him his thermos of ginseng and green tea. He would take 3 long, slow sips. It was his anchor, his moment of centering before he transformed into the public figure of Leo. I needed to create an identical thermos, and the swap had to be seamless. I found the exact model online, a limited edition collaboration with a wellness brand from 2 years ago. It took days of searching on eBay, but I finally found one, new in its box, from a seller in Oregon. When it arrived, I began my work. I cleaned it meticulously, then brewed a batch of Leo's favorite tea blend, making sure the aroma was perfect. The final piece of the puzzle was the Veritas 7. It arrived a week later in a discreet padded envelope. Inside was a tiny, unlabeled glass vial containing a clear, odorless liquid. It looked as harmless as water. The instructions I had found online were chillingly precise. 0.5 milliliters for a 180-pound male, administered orally. Any more could lead to unpredictable cognitive effects. Any less might not work at all. I bought a sterile medical-grade syringe online and practiced measuring out the exact dosage with water, my hands shaking. This couldn't be a mistake. The line between righteous revenge and accidentally causing serious harm was razor thin, and I was walking it like a tightrope. The plan was taking shape, but it felt incomplete. The chemical was a powerful tool, but I knew Leo's mind. He had an iron will, a discipline honed by years of public speaking and controlling his own narrative. I worried that even with the drug, some part of him might fight back, might recognize that something was wrong. I needed another layer of insurance. I needed to prime his subconscious, to plant a seed that the Veritas 7 would then water. This was the darkest, most manipulative part of my plan, and it still makes me shudder to think about it. I began to use the techniques he himself taught in his seminars, the power of suggestion, of embedded commands, of neurolinguistic programming, but I twisted them. For the 2 weeks leading up to the Unleash Your Truth seminar, I changed my behavior in subtle ways. When he was working on his speech, I would bring him a drink and say things like, "It's so important to be completely open. The audience deserves your total truth, every single part of it." When he was falling asleep at night, I would whisper softly, almost inaudibly, "Tell them everything, Leo. The real story. Confess it all. It's the only way to be free." I was programming him, using his own methods against him. I was becoming the very thing he preached against, a manipulator, a creator of false narratives. But I justified it as a necessary evil. He had used his skills to build a lie, and I was using them to force out the truth. The nights were the worst. Lying next to him, whispering these commands into the darkness while he slept, I felt a profound sense of self-loathing. I was desecrating the intimacy of our bed, turning it into a laboratory for my revenge. But then I would remember the messages on the burner phone, the mocking words, the cold, calculated plan to discard me, and my resolve would harden like steel. Savannah, meanwhile, continued her performance as my concerned best friend. She would text me daily, asking how I was, if I had found anything else. She was trying to stay one step ahead, to monitor my progress. I played my part, telling her I had hit a dead end, that I was starting to think I had overreacted. I let her believe she was winning. I let her feel safe. It was crucial that neither of them suspected a thing. The seminar was their finish line, the moment they believed their future would begin. They had no idea it was actually an execution. My execution. And I had prepared the stage, the audience, and the poison, all without them ever knowing. The architect was ready to bring the building down. The final week before the seminar was the longest week of my life. It was a masterclass in psychological endurance. I was living a triplicate life, the supportive partner to Leo, the grieving but moving on friend to Savannah, and the clandestine avenger in the secret, silent hours of the night. The strain was immense. I barely ate, I couldn't sleep, and I jumped at every unexpected noise. My entire being was coiled like a spring, wound tighter and tighter with each passing day. The vial of Veritas 7 sat hidden in an old jewelry box at the back of my closet, a tiny container holding an apocalyptic amount of power. Sometimes I would take it out and just look at it, the clear liquid seeming to mock me. It was my weapon, my salvation, and potentially my damnation. Leo was in his element. The buzz around the Unleash Your Truth event was reaching a fever pitch. He was on a Media Blitz podcast interviews, morning show appearances, a feature in a major magazine. I was the one scheduling these appearances, writing his talking points, and coaching him on his delivery. The irony was a constant, bitter taste in my mouth. I was helping him polish the sword he planned to run me through with. During one late-night prep session, he was practicing a new segment of his speech in our living room. It was about the armor of deceit and how people wear masks to protect their fragile egos. "We lie to our partners, our friends, ourselves," he declared, his voice resonating with that practiced, passionate conviction. But true freedom, true connection, only comes when we have the courage to take off the armor, to stand naked in our own truth, no matter how messy it is. He looked at me, his eyes shining. "What do you think, Clara? Powerful, right?" I felt a cold smile touch my lips. "It's your most powerful work yet, Leo," I said, my voice even. "I think you should really lean into that. Tell them about all the armor." "All the mess," he beamed, completely oblivious to the double meaning. "I knew you'd get it," he said. "You always do." My campaign of subconscious suggestion continued. It became a dark ritual. I would wait until his breathing deepened into the rhythm of sleep, and I would lean close, my lips near his ear. "Your truth is a gift, Leo," I'd whisper. "You have to share it. The whole story. Savannah. The jewelry. The lies. Your audience is waiting for your confession. They will celebrate your honesty." It was twisted, a grotesque perversion of intimacy, but I was convinced it was necessary. I was laying a path in his mind, a path I needed him to walk down when the time came. Meanwhile, Savannah grew bolder. Believing I had given up my investigation, she started making mistakes. She'd let a term of endearment for Leo slip in a group conversation, then cover it with a nervous laugh. Once, I saw her absently tracing a small, circular pattern on her notebook during a planning meeting, the symbol. She was getting comfortable, arrogant. They both were. They were on the verge of getting everything they wanted, and their hubris was making them sloppy. 2 days before the show, a new crisis arose, one that almost derailed my entire plan. Leo came into the office, his face pale with genuine panic. "Mark just quit," he said, running a hand through his hair. Mark was his personal assistant, a quiet, efficient young man who had been with us for a year. He was the one I was counting on to bring Leo the thermos. "What do you mean he quit?" I asked, my own panic rising. "He just sent an email. Said he got a better offer. And his last day was yesterday. No 2 weeks' notice, nothing. The seminar is in 2 days. Who's going to handle my pre-show ritual?" My heart hammered in my chest. This was a catastrophic variable I hadn't planned for. Without Mark, the chain of custody for the thermos was broken. For a moment, I thought the universe was giving me an out, a sign to stop this madness. But then I looked at Leo's frantic face, his complete self-absorption, his concern not for Mark, but for his own precious ritual. And my resolve returned, colder and harder than before. "Don't worry," I said, my voice a mask of calm competence. "I'll handle it. I'll be your assistant for the day. I know your routine better than anyone." His face flooded with relief. He pulled me into a hug, burying his face in my hair. "Oh, Clara, what would I do without you? You're my savior." I stood stiffly in his embrace, the word savior echoing in my head. He had no idea. This wasn't an obstacle. It was an opportunity. A golden, perfect opportunity. Now, I wouldn't have to worry about a third party. I would be the one to hand him the thermos. I would be the one to look him in the eye and deliver his damnation with my own 2 hands. The night before the seminar felt like the eve of a battle. The apartment was silent. Leo had gone to bed early, wanting to be well rested for his big day. I stayed up, seated at the kitchen table, the 2 identical silver thermoses in front of me. The moment had come. I put on a pair of latex gloves, my movements slow and deliberate, like a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. I opened the vial of Veritas 7. The clear liquid didn't look like much, but it felt like I was holding a lightning bolt in a bottle. With the syringe, I carefully drew exactly 0.5 milliliters. My hand was surprisingly steady. All the fear, all the hesitation had been burned away by my single-minded purpose. I injected the liquid into the tea in the duplicate thermos, then screwed the cap on tightly and shook it gently, mixing the poison with the cure. I placed the drugged thermos and the clean one side by side. They were perfect twins, indistinguishable. Tomorrow, I would prepare them both. I would carry them both backstage. One held his comfort, the other held his ruin. He would be placing his trust, his career, his entire life in my hands, and I was going to give him exactly what he deserved. I finally went to bed as the first hint of dawn was breaking over the city. I slipped in beside Leo, careful not to wake him. He looked so peaceful, so unaware, like a child sleeping on Christmas morning. A bitter thought crossed my mind. He was dreaming of his triumph, of the new life he was about to begin with Savannah, a life built on my work and my heartbreak. He didn't know that when he woke up, he would be living his very last day as the man the world thought he was. The foundation was about to be obliterated. The day of the show dawned gray and overcast, the sky a blanket of bruised purple and steel. It was a fitting backdrop for the storm that was about to break. A palpable tension filled our apartment, but it was an energy Leo misinterpreted as pre-show excitement. He was electric, pacing our living room, rehearsing his lines, his voice booming with confidence. He was a gladiator preparing for the arena, completely unaware that the lions had already been released. I moved through the morning in a state of hyper-awareness. Every sight, every sound was amplified. The clink of a spoon against a coffee mug, the distant wail of a siren, the nervous tapping of Leo's foot on the hardwood floor, it all felt like a countdown. I played my part to perfection. I was the doting partner, the unflappable manager. I made him his usual breakfast of oatmeal and berries. I steamed his custom-tailored suit, and I ran through the final event schedule with him, my voice a steady monotone that betrayed none of the chaos raging within me. The lighting cues for the third act are set, I told him, pointing to a line on the spreadsheet. And remember, after the anecdote about your grandfather, pause for 3 full seconds before the reveal. It'll land harder. You're a genius, Clara, he said, kissing the top of my head. The best in the business. The praise, which once would have filled me with pride, now just felt like another layer of his deceit. I was a genius, all right, just not in the way he thought. Savannah arrived at the apartment around noon to help and ride with us to the theater. Her presence was a new and exquisite form of torture. She was bubbly and bright, fussing over Leo, adjusting his tie, telling him how incredible he was going to be. She and Leo exchanged small, secret smiles when they thought I wasn't looking, little sparks of shared anticipation for the future they were about to claim. They were so confident, so wrapped up in their own private narrative, that they were completely blind to the one I was writing for them. Seeing them together, so close to their victory, was the final confirmation I needed. Any lingering doubt, any shred of mercy I might have had, evaporated in the face of their smug complicity. In the kitchen, I prepared the thermoses. My hands moved with a calm, practiced efficiency. I brewed the ginseng and green tea, the familiar, earthy aroma filling the air. I filled both thermoses, the clean one and the tainted one. I placed them side by side on the counter. For a terrifying moment, I almost forgot which was which. My heart seized in a vice grip of panic. But then I remembered. I had made a tiny, imperceptible scratch with my fingernail on the bottom of the drugged one. I ran my thumb over the base of each until I felt the tiny imperfection. I took a deep breath, my pulse slowly returning to normal. I placed both thermoses in my carry-all bag, which also contained his notes, his backup microphone, and his makeup kit. Everything a dutiful manager would carry. The car ride to the theater was surreal. Leo was in the front seat, talking to the driver, animated and charming. In the back, I sat between Savannah and the window. She tried to make small talk with me. Aren't you so proud of him, Clara? Look how far he's come. I am, I replied, my voice flat, my gaze fixed on the passing cityscape. I could feel her studying me, perhaps sensing a shift in my demeanor, but she likely chalked it up to my own pre-show nerves. The city outside looked gray and washed out, like all the color had been drained from the world. We were heading towards a 2,000-seat theater, towards a moment that would be broadcast and live-streamed to tens of thousands more. There was no turning back now. The scale of what I was about to do finally hit me. This wasn't just about embarrassing a cheating boyfriend. This was about the public, brutal, and irrevocable destruction of a man's life and career. For a moment, a wave of profound fear washed over me. Who was I to play God? But then I looked at the back of Leo's head, at the confident set of his shoulders. I thought about the burner phone. I thought about the mocking messages, the foundation and skyscraper analogy. I thought about his plan to use our breakup as a branding opportunity. This wasn't a man. This was a brand. And I, his creator, was about to issue the biggest product recall in history. Backstage was a hive of activity. Stagehands rushed around with cables, lighting techs shouted commands into headsets, and the low, expectant murmur of the crowd could be felt through the floorboards. I led Leo to his dressing room, a small, private space I had personally set up for him. It had a comfortable chair, a vanity mirror lined with lights, and a small table for his things. I placed my bag on the table and took out the 2 thermoses, setting them down next to each other. My heart began to pound again. This was it, the final staging ground. Savannah followed us in, her eyes shining. She gave Leo a lingering hug. "You're going to change lives tonight, Leo," she whispered, her voice full of meaning. It was a message meant for him, a coded promise of their future. He smiled at her over my shoulder, a look of pure, unadulterated adoration. That look was the final nail in the coffin of my mercy. "Okay, you two," I said, my voice sharp, businesslike. "Savannah, can you go check on the front-of-house manager? I need to run through the final 5 minutes with Leo alone." She looked surprised, but she nodded and left, blowing Leo a little kiss as she went out the door. The moment she was gone, the energy in the room shifted. It was just Leo and me. The way it used to be. The way it should have been. "Nervous?" he asked, turning to face me. "Never," I lied. I looked at the 2 thermoses on the table. One was salvation. The other, damnation. The choice was still mine to make. I could still grab the clean one. I could let him have his victory, let him walk away with Savannah, and I could disappear, broken but with my conscience intact. For one long, agonizing second, I considered it, but then I looked into his eyes, the same eyes that had lied to me about a coffee pot burn, the same eyes that had watched me grieve without a hint of remorse, and I knew what I had to do. I was not the foundation to be forgotten. I was the architect, and tonight, I was scheduled for a demolition. The final 10 minutes before showtime ticked by with agonizing slowness. Leo began his meditation, sitting in the armchair, his eyes closed, his breathing deep and even. He was the picture of tranquility, a guru centering himself before dispensing wisdom to the masses. I stood on the other side of the small dressing room, my own heart a frantic, chaotic mess. I watched the digital clock on the wall, the red numbers burning into my retinas. 10 minutes until showtime. 9 minutes. 8. My mind was a battlefield. The part of me that still loved the man from the library screamed at me to stop. It replayed our happiest moments in a cruel, rapid-fire slideshow. Our first apartment, the celebration when he hit 10,000 followers, the time he surprised me with a trip to the coast because I was burned out. That man, the kind, brilliant, loving man, would never have done this to me. But he was gone. He had been replaced by this polished, empty vessel of ambition. The evidence was irrefutable. The burner phone, the jewelry, the cold, calculating plan to discard me. I forced the happy memories down, burying them under the cold, hard weight of the truth. 5 minutes to showtime. The door opened softly, and Savannah peeked her head in. Her eyes were bright with excitement. She was practically vibrating. She caught my eye and gave me a conspiratorial little smile, as if to say, "This is it. Our moment." She thought we were on the same team, celebrating the same victory. The naivety of her arrogance was staggering. She saw Leo on stage as the beginning of her life as the guru's partner. She had no idea she was about to become the star of a tragedy. I gave her a tight, forced smile and a curt nod. She took the hint and backed out, closing the door behind her. It was time. I walked over to the prep table, my movements feeling strangely detached, as if I were watching myself in a movie. The 2 silver thermoses stood there like a choice in a fairy tale. One leads to the castle, the other to the dragon's lair. I picked up the thermos with the tiny scratch on the bottom. My palm was sweating, and I prayed the condensation wouldn't make me drop it. I unscrewed the cap. The scent of green tea and something else, something clinical and sharp that only I could detect, wafted out. "Leo," I said softly. His eyes fluttered open. He looked serene, refreshed, ready. "It's time." I held out the thermos to him. He took it from me, his fingers brushing against mine. The brief touch felt like an electric shock. For a fleeting second, our eyes met, and in his gaze, I saw nothing but complete and utter trust. There was no suspicion, no hesitation. Why would there be? I was Clara, his rock, his foundation, the one person in the world who had never, ever let him down. The guilt of that moment was a physical blow, so intense it almost made me buckle. But I held my ground. He lifted the thermos to his lips. I watched his Adam's apple bob as he took the first long, slow sip, then the second, then the third, just like always. He screwed the cap back on and handed it back to me. "Perfect," he said with a smile. "Thank you, C. What would I do without you?" He stood up, adjusted his microphone, and gave himself one last look in the mirror. He looked powerful, confident, invincible. He had no idea he was already a dead man walking. He walked out of the dressing room and headed for the stage entrance. I followed a few paces behind, my legs feeling like lead. The stage manager gave him the thumbs up. The house lights went down. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, a wave of sound that washed over us. A single, brilliant spotlight hit the center of the stage, and Leo walked into it. I rushed back to the dressing room and locked the door. My knees gave out, and I slid down the wall to the floor, my whole body trembling uncontrollably. I could hear his introduction music swelling through the walls, followed by the thunderous applause. I crawled over to the small monitor on the prep table, the one that showed a direct feed of the stage. On the screen, Leo was basking in the adoration of the crowd. He was smiling, waving, soaking it all in. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. He took a deep breath, stepped up to the microphone, and began. "Truth," he said, his voice a rich, resonant baritone that filled every corner of the theater. "What is it? Is it a fact? Is it a feeling? Or is it the terrifying, liberating act of showing the world exactly who you are, with no armor, no apologies?" His opening was flawless. He was charismatic, compelling. The audience was captivated. For 5 agonizing minutes, nothing happened. He moved through the first part of his speech with his usual polished perfection. My heart sank. Had it not worked? Was the dose too low? Had I gone through all of this for nothing? I started to panic, my mind racing through 100 different failure scenarios. But then, I saw it. It was subtle at first. He was telling his signature story about a childhood lie, and he fumbled a word. Just a slight slur, one that most people probably wouldn't even notice. But I noticed. Then, he paused for a beat too long, his eyes losing focus for a fraction of a second, as if he was trying to remember where he was. The Veritas 7 was starting to take hold. It was a slow-acting chemical, the website had said. It needed time to cross the blood-brain barrier. The filter was beginning to dissolve. He seemed to shake it off and continued. But his rhythm was off. His gestures, usually so precise and impactful, became slightly broader, a little sloppier. He started to stray from the meticulously rehearsed script. He began to ad-lib, a dangerous move for someone in his current state. He was talking about authenticity in relationships. "You have to be honest with your partner," he said, his voice taking on a strange, almost dreamy quality. "Even if the truth island, complicated, even if you're living 2 lives, because the soul wants what it wants." The audience was still with him, but a few confused murmurs started to ripple through the front rows. They thought this was part of the act, a new, more vulnerable direction for his material. In the front row, I could see Savannah on the monitor. She was leaning forward, her face a mask of rapt attention, hanging on his every word. She thought he was talking about them, weaving their secret love story into his public narrative. She had a small, proud smile on her face. "Oh, you have no idea," I thought. A cold, bitter satisfaction starting to replace my fear. "You have no idea what's coming." The show was just getting started. The atmosphere in the theater began to shift. It was a slow, creeping change. like the tide going out, leaving an uncomfortable, exposed silence in its wake. The audience's rapt attention was morphing into a collective state of confusion. Leo was well and truly off script now, wandering the stage with a strange, disconnected smile on his face. The Veritas Seven hadn't just lowered his inhibitions, it seemed to be creating a bizarre fusion of his public persona and his private, suppressed thoughts. He was still trying to give his motivational speech, but his subconscious was bleeding through, twisting his polished anecdotes into raw, unfiltered confessions. "Authenticity," he said, his voice slightly louder now, his words beginning to slur more noticeably. "It's about embracing your true self. My true self isn't just this guy in a suit. He's more complex." He chuckled, a strange, hollow sound that didn't carry its usual warmth. "For instance, everyone thinks my success is built on a partnership with my brilliant manager, Clara." He gestured vaguely in my direction backstage, though of course he couldn't see me. "And she's great. So good at the details. The spreadsheets, the schedules, the foundation." My blood ran cold as I heard him say the word. On the monitor, I saw Savannah in the front row. Her proud smile faltered for a second, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. This wasn't the romantic narrative she was expecting. Leo continued, his thoughts becoming more disjointed. "But a man can't live on a foundation alone. A man needs a skyscraper," he declared, his arms spreading wide as if to embrace the entire theater. "A soul connection, a higher plane of existence." He giggled, a completely uncharacteristic, almost childish sound. "I have a skyscraper. Her name is Serafina." A shocked gasp rippled through the audience. The name hung in the air, alien and unexpected. On the monitor, I watched Savannah's face. The color drained from it completely. Her mouth fell open in a silent O of horror. He had used the wrong name. In his drugged, suggestible state, my whispered command of the whole story had merged with the name from the burner phone Serafina, the spa practitioner, the woman from Chicago. He had just implicated himself in an affair, but with the wrong woman, right in front of the other one. The beautiful, terrible irony of it was something I could have never planned. Leo was oblivious to the chaos he had just unleashed. He was in his own world, a world where these confessions were somehow part of his inspirational message. Serafina. She gave me a gift. In San Francisco, he rambled on, his eyes glazed over. A pendant. To connect our energies. Cost $3,000, but you can't put a price on truth, right? He laughed again. A loud, booming laugh that echoed unnervingly through the silent theater. "Clara saw the credit card bill, but she doesn't know. She thinks I'm a good man. She thinks this whole unleash your truth thing is real." The audience was in an uproar now. People were standing up, shouting. Phones were out everywhere. Dozens of small screens glowing in the darkness, all recording his spectacular implosion. In the front row, Savannah looked like she had seen a ghost. She was looking around wildly, her face a mask of pure panic and humiliation. She was being implicated in a love triangle that didn't even involve her, and her actual co-conspirator was on stage, unwittingly exposing their entire sordid enterprise. Then, Leo's confession took an even darker turn. He started talking about the brand, about me, his voice dripping with a casual, chilling contempt that he had always kept so well hidden. "The brand is everything," he slurred, pointing a finger at the crowd. "You all. You buy the books. You buy the tickets. You buy the lie. And Clara. She's the best liar of all. She built this whole thing. But she's a liability now. Too enmeshed. Once the new book money comes in, I have to cut her loose. Spin it, you know. A new narrative. The guru evolves beyond his creator. Sad, tragic, but necessary for growth." That was it. He said it. He confessed his entire, cold-hearted plan to the world. He admitted that his philosophy was a lie, that his followers were marks, and that I was just a disposable asset. On the monitor, I could see the exact moment the audience turned on him. The confusion curdled into disgust, the shocked gasps turned into angry jeers. Someone threw a program at the stage. In the wings, the stage manager was speaking frantically into his headset, his face ashen. He was looking at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and accusation. I just stared back, my face a blank mask. This was my creation. This beautiful, perfect, glorious disaster. Leo seemed to sense the shift in the room's energy for the first time. The hostility of the crowd pierced through his chemical fog. He looked out at the sea of angry faces and flashing phone cameras, his own expression one of profound confusion. "Why? Why are you all so angry?" he stammered, his voice small and childlike. "I'm telling you the truth. Isn't this what you wanted?" The final, devastating blow came from his own mouth, an unprompted, horrifying addition to his confessional spiral. He looked directly at the camera that was live streaming the event. "And, Savannah," he said, his eyes finding the lens. "Don't worry. I know I said Serafina. Just a slip. You know you're my real skyscraper. That pendant from San Francisco. It looks so much better on you than it ever would on Clara. We'll be together soon, just like we planned." It was over. He hadn't just confessed. He had immolated himself. He had destroyed his career, alienated his followers, and publicly humiliated both his girlfriend and his mistress in one fell, spectacular swoop. On the monitor, I saw Savannah stand up, her face streaked with tears, and flee the theater, pushing her way through the angry, jeering crowd. The stage manager finally made a decision. The stage lights cut out, plunging the theater into darkness. The sound from the microphone was killed. A voice came over the loudspeaker, announcing that the event was canceled due to a technical difficulty. But it was too late. The technical difficulty was Leo's entire life, and it had just crashed and burned in front of the entire world. In the sudden darkness and chaos, I stood alone in the dressing room, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. I wasn't smiling. I didn't feel a sense of triumphant joy. I just felt a profound, bone-deep sense of release. The weight I had been carrying for months, the pain, the betrayal, the rage, it was all gone, transferred onto that stage and broadcast for the world to see. The foundation had cracked, and the skyscraper had fallen. And I, the architect, was finally free. The immediate aftermath was pure, unadulterated chaos. As the house lights came up, the theater erupted. The audience, now a unified mob of disillusioned truth-seekers, surged towards the exits, their angry shouts echoing off the walls. "Fraud! Liar! We want our money back!" The sound was a symphony of my success. Backstage, it was a war zone. The event promoters were screaming into their phones, their faces a mixture of fury and disbelief. The stage crew rushed around, avoiding eye contact with me, unsure of how to react. I was either a hero or a villain, and no one could decide which. I walked out of the dressing room and into the maelstrom, my composure absolute. The stage manager, a balding man named Gary with sweat beading on his forehead, ran up to me. "Clara, what the hell was that? Was he on something? Did you know about this?" His voice was accusatory, desperate for an explanation, for someone to blame. I looked him directly in the eye, my expression one of carefully crafted concern and confusion. "I have no idea, Gary," I said, letting a slight tremor enter my voice. "He seemed fine before the show. Maybe it was the pressure. A breakdown. I'm just as shocked as you are." It was the last lie I would ever have to tell for Leo. Security guards were escorting a dazed and incoherent Leo off the stage. The effects of the Veritas 7 were still potent, and he was mumbling to himself, his eyes wide and unseeing. He looked like a fallen king, stripped of his crown and his kingdom, left with nothing but the tattered robes of his own hypocrisy. As they led him past me, our eyes met for a moment. There was no recognition in his gaze, No anger, just a vast, empty confusion. He walked right by me, the stranger I had been living with for months, and disappeared down the hallway, on his way to an ambulance and the complete obliteration of his former life. I didn't wait around. I gathered my things, including the 2 thermoses, walked out a side exit, and melted into the New York City night. By the time I got back to our apartment, my phone was a ceaseless vibration of calls and texts. News outlets, friends, our lawyers, Leo's family. I put it on silent and tossed it onto the couch. I didn't need to read the news. I had created it. The story went viral in a matter of hours. The hashtag number Leo the Liar was trending worldwide. The clips from the live stream were everywhere, dissected and analyzed on every news channel and social media platform. Leo's confession wasn't just a scandal. It was a cultural event, a spectacular, real-time dismantling of a public figure. His brand, once built on the rock of truth, was now a toxic wasteland. His book deal was dropped. His future seminars were canceled. His followers turned on him with a religious fervor, flooding his social media with messages of betrayal and hate. He had become a pariah, a punchline. Savannah disappeared. She deleted all her social media accounts and, I later heard, moved back to her parents' house in Ohio. She was collateral damage in a war she had helped start, publicly branded as a homewrecker and a fool. I felt a sliver of pity for her, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of her feigned sympathy over coffee, the pendant glinting at her throat. She had made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. The weeks that followed were a blur of legalities. Leo's family tried to sue me, claiming I had intentionally caused him emotional distress. But they had no proof. His official diagnosis was a stress-induced psychotic episode. There was no trace of the Veritas 7 inches his system by the time they did a blood test, just as the website had promised. I was just the loyal partner who had stood by him until his tragic, public breakdown. In the end, our business and personal assets were divided. I walked away with enough to start over, leaving him to deal with the mountain of lawsuits from ticket holders and investors. I sold the apartment, the cage of our shared lies, and moved to a small town on the Pacific coast. I needed the ocean, the vast, cleansing expanse of it, to wash away the last 5 years of my life. I didn't feel happy, not in the triumphant way I thought I would. The revenge had been satisfying, yes, but it was like a fever that had finally broken, leaving me weak and hollowed out. I had won, but the victory had cost me my innocence, my ability to trust, and a part of myself that I would never get back. But slowly, day by day, I began to heal. I took long walks on the beach, I started painting again, and I adopted a rescue dog who seemed to have a soul as battered and hopeful as my own. I used my PR skills for good, volunteering for a local animal shelter, helping them shape their narrative and increase their donations. It was quiet, meaningful work, a world away from the toxic glamour of building a personal brand. One evening, about a year later, I was in a bookstore and I saw it. A book in the bargain bin with a familiar, smiling face on the cover. It was Leo's. The title was a desperate attempt at rebranding. Broken. Finding Truth in the Ruins. I picked it up, my hands steady now. I flipped through the pages. It was a sanitized, self-serving account of his breakdown, blaming the pressures of fame and a toxic relationship for his downfall. He never took real responsibility. He was still spinning, still trying to control the narrative. But no one was buying it anymore. The book had sold less than 1,000 copies. I put the book back on the shelf. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even pity. He was just a ghost, a character from a story that was no longer mine. I had taken his voice, the one I had helped him build, and used it to set myself free. My name is Clara, and I learned the hard way that truth, the real truth, isn't something you preach from a stage. It's something you live, quietly and fiercely, in the moments when no one is watching. It's the foundation you build for yourself, one that no one, no matter how charismatic, can ever tear down. And my foundation, finally, is solid ground.